this is my review of that time I got reincarnated as a slime. Okay, so in this episode, Rimuru finally finishes his preparations for Walpurgis and finally sits down with all the other demon lords at long last and kind of gets an appraisal of all the different demon lords that there are over there. And in addition to that, we actually see Shuna's first fight against a dude, and it turns out she's a bit of a badass. So yeah, this episode. So yeah, the main bulk of this episode is to just show how surprisingly powerful Shuna is. So it starts off with Shuna finishing the final preparations on Rimuru's garb for the Demon Lord banquet, Walpurgis. And after fawning over him a little bit, pointing out with Shion and Ranga pointing out that he looks really snazzy in it. Shuna then proceeds to take her leave, explaining how now that she's done with helping Rimuru make his preparations for Walpurgis, she can now go and join Soei and Hakurou and help them take on Lord Demon Lord Clayman's castle. And with that, she then uses teleportation magic and leaves and goes to meet up with them. I'll put that latter half of that off screen, but she does leave and go meet with him. At which point, Rimuru realizes that he doesn't really know any of the demon lords that he needs to know going in. And then proceeds to pick Veldora and Ramri's brain to actually figure out what kind of demon lords there are. And we find out a couple of demon lords that he hasn't met yet. Some of which we have met before. There's like 2 or 3 we haven't. There's one called Deagle, who we meet later. We do eventually meet him, but they explain how Rimuru kind of explains how she kind of doesn't like him very much. And we do find out a little bit about that later. But there's also a mention of a guy named Drago. I don't actually know how to pronounce his name, but long story short, this guy, he's not even a major character in this episode. But long story short, the Veldora only remembers him because he fought against him once, and he was powerful enough that that Veldora actually wound up remembering him. And also he remembers a young girl that he met as well, who was also a demon lord, who he fought a couple of times because he raised one of their cities as a quote-unquote joke, which Rimuru points out he probably shouldn't have done anyway, but he can't really remember her name, only that star was either Milis or Luminous or something like that, but he does point out that Ramri's does point out that there's a guy called Roy Valentine who's been serving as Demon Lord for a while now, and Rimuru kind of concludes that he's been serving in her stead for a while now. So he likely points out that she's likely either retired or is currently just dead or something. But in case, as we actually see, he actually finally gets an account of all the different demon lords that are there. A giant stone door just appears in Rimuru's living room, like literally just this giant stone gate just appears, and out walks a Misery who we've seen in this episode but haven't formally met. And she actually is there to escort Rimuru, Ramri's over to the Demon Lord castle and actually escort them to Walpurgis so they can actually figure out what's going on with that. Rimuru is just happy to see Misery, who she points out hasn't really changed much of a bit, in hopes that she and Azure are doing well. So Misery and Azure are, and Rimuru implies that they're supposed to be demons because he can sense their energy through and notes that they're incredibly powerful. So he knows that they're likely primordial demons. And so he concludes that they're and since he knows who Guy Crimson is at this point, since he recounted all the demon lords that he didn't know personally, I skipped over a couple of them because we know who they are, but Rimuru doesn't. He then concludes that they're likely serving under Guy Crimson, and concludes that if Guy Crimson has demons under his envoy as maids, that he must be incredibly powerful. So, but in any case, with that, Rimuru then proceeds to get ready to go through the door, and with Shion and Ranga and Oto, and they head off to Walpurgis. And that's, for the most part, all we see of them up until the end of the episode, where Rimuru actually arrives at Walpurgis. So, I'll get to that in a minute. But in case, back in the grounds surrounding Clayman's castle, Shuna and Soei and Hakurou are walking toward his castle in an effort to try and invade it and destroy it. But they note that their magical sense isn't working and they can't actually get a good survey of the land about what's going on around them. And as it turns out, and as Shuna surmises, that was actually the point, because apparently we do finally meet Adalman in this episode. Apparently he has the ability to negate people's magical sense and sense where he is. So in case in point, he then proceeds to summon an entire giant ass army of undead to surround them. And when they realize that they've been surrounded and have been laid in their trap, they realize that they'll probably need to fight their way out. Only for Shuna pointing out that won't actually be necessary, because she actually spies Adalman in the back. And sure enough, we finally meet Adalman, who shows up and points out that they can't actually that they're not actually going to be able to get anywhere near close to Clayman's castle, since, as he points out, it is his job to actually keep everybody away from Clayman's castle, and he won't allow any of them to pass. At which point Hakurou tries and fails to attack him. He actually summons an undead knight to actually defend him, which Hakurou is more than happy with, because it means he gets to actually face off against another swordsman, and he even remarks that even in death, the guy still clearly remembers his swordplay. So the two of them proceed to face off. At which point, Soei tries to attack Adalman as well, but Adalman summons an undead dragon. Yes, he has an undead. He just has a dragon on standby. But he sends an undead dragon actually deal with Soei, who realizes that. Who tries to kill it using his silk thread thing that he uses, only to discover that it actually just regenerates if he tries to kill it, and realizes that he'll have to destroy both its body and soul in order to kill it. But Shuna merely points out that its soul is actually residing within Adalman, and then asks Soei to let her deal with it. And Soei points out that it's actually a little too dangerous for her to do that, but she points out that it'll be fine because she's angry. So and after remembering that they've actually changed a lot since both literally and metaphorically, since they've actually met Rimuru, he concludes that's most likely fine, and allows Shuna to actually challenge Adalman herself, while he deals with the undead dragon, and Hakurou deals with the undead knight. At which point, she and Adalman actually begin to exchange words, and she actually puts a barrier around the arena where they're going to fight, so that nobody can actually interfere. And then proceeds to point, and then Adalman realizes that she has since figured out his trick about how he actually operates, and wonders why she's doing there, pointing out that it's unlikely for someone as powerful as her to just kind of wander into Clayman's mist. And she merely points out that she wants to actually defeat Clayman because of the war he's caused, and also points out that she also wants to try and free Adalman if she can, pointing out that Adalman really has no quarrel with them, and obviously somebody as powerful as him should have no problem actually breaking the seal over his heart to actually disconnect him from Clayman. But Adalman merely points out that if he had been able to do it, he would have done so by now. And at which point he and Shuna then proceed to fight. And it quickly becomes apparent that Shuna is actually a lot more powerful than she lets on, because obviously a lot of her more intrinsic skills are into cooking, and sewing and a whole bunch of other householdy things. So when she actually fights, it actually catches people a little bit off guard. Case in point, she uses fire to perfectly deflect an attack from Adalman, and then uses holy magic to defend another attack, which throws him for a loop, because as he points out, or at least thinks that's how it works. He believes that she actually can't use holy magic because she's a monster, but she merely points out to him that it doesn't really matter if you're a monster or a human or anything else. As long as you have a prayer and a promise to be heard, the church and the holy magic will actually come to you and answer. At which point Adalman realizes that he's actually been a fool this whole time, pointing out that for the longest time, that he actually explains his backstory about how he died, and he believed that once he had taken the form of an undead lich, he points out that he thought he was beyond the ability to actually use holy magic, but thanks to Shuna, he's actually opened his eyes a little bit and realized that he can actually use holy magic despite being an undead monster. So, with that, proceeds to summon a prayer of his own to actually try and take out Shuna in one fell swoop. Use something the disintegration skill that Hinata Sakaguchi actually summons in her fight against Rimuru, but it plays out a little bit differently here in that Shuna actually overwrites his spell and then uses it to free him from the spot where he was, and proceeds to kind of just summon him and obliterate all of his forces in one fell swoop. So she just kind of takes out all of the monsters single-handedly. So yeah, as I said at the beginning of this review, Shuna's a badass. But in case after everybody reconvenes, Hakurou points out that Shuna really does know how to hold her own against them, and Soei immediately points out that they really shouldn't have been so drawn to anger as they were, and that Rimuru was right, and that in war feelings can become a little bit unpredictable. But Shuna merely remarks that now that it's over, they can actually go and deal with Clayman's castle. But before they can actually do that, they're actually approached by Adalman, who I kid you not, has since had a complete change of heart since Shuna saved him, and now reveres her as basically a goddess, and also wants to revere Rimuru as a goddess, pointing out that somebody who gave her all of her power and had actually given her the power she needed to actually save him, points out that probably is a pretty cool dude in his book and probably is worth worshiping. And pointing out that he had actually lost faith in the god Luminous a long time ago because he had become an undead lich. But now that he knows that Shuna can still find faith in spite of the fact that she's a monster, he points out that he should probably give it a second shot with another quote unquote god. And she merely points out that he's not that Rimuru isn't exactly a god, but after thinking about how Rimuru has actually helps draw so many people and inspire them, she realizes there's really no harm in it, and concludes that he can indeed worship Rimuru and help further their society, pointing out that he would actually be a perfect addition to their basically would just be a perfect addition to their group in general. And Adalman is happy to hear that. And as a reward for them actually saving him, he then proceeds to show them how to actually get into Clayman's castle, and beckons for them to follow. So they just kind of follow him into Clayman's castle, and that's the last we see of them. So yeah, Shuna saved a lich from being controlled by Clayman, and now she's kind of developed a fellowship of her own. Adalman now reveres her as a goddess as well. So. Yeah, mainly because Shuna actually showed him the error of his ways and showed him that he can still use holy magic and still practice what he was able to do in life. So yeah, long story short, he's happy. I'm just a little bit happy for her. She saved a dude, and now he kind of follows her around as a worshiper. So yeah, it's kind of a really cool episode because it just shows Shuna holding her own in a fight, which is something the series hasn't really done before now. There's been like one instance where it was implied that she was able to hold her own against somebody, but this is the first time she's actually fought somebody outright. So I'm very proud of her here. But in case with that out of the way, we then actually see Rimuru sit down for Walpurgis, and he actually gets a lay of the other demon lords as they're coming in. As I said, he actually gets a lay of both Guy Crimson, who is already there, and kind of just stares some death daggers while he's sitting down, and points out that he should probably be a little bit wary of him. But he also meets some of the other demon lords as well. But in any case, we actually meet Dagrol in the scene. However briefly, and he does sit down. He does sit down ever so briefly. But Rimuru can tell by the sheer size of him that he's actually a pretty intimidating dude, and that he's actually definitely deserves to be one of the demon lords. At which point he actually sees Roy Valentine come in with his maid. And while he senses Roy Valentine is indeed a demon lord, he also senses that the maid is actually the true demon lord behind the scenes. And though he doesn't know her name, he does sense that she is incredibly powerful, and knows that he should probably keep an eye on her. He doesn't actually know what her name is, but he does sense that she is indeed incredibly powerful. At which point Frey walks in, and Rimuru and Shion actually notices something odd about one of her followers, namely that he's wearing a lion mask. And while Rimuru actually stares her down a little bit and kind of ogles her a little bit, which is kind of funny, but then Shuna interrupts, although Rimuru believes that she's actually interrupting because he stared at another woman and thought that he was going to die right then and there. But she merely points out that she actually took interest in her servant, and Rimuru tries to analyzes his abilities but does conclude that it wouldn't actually be Demon Lord Carrion, pointing out that obviously if Carrion were still alive, he wouldn't be out in the open all that easily. At which point Clayman actually walks in with Milim in tow, and while Rimuru is happy that Milim is safe, Clayman then proceeds to beat her in the head for walking too slow, which pisses Rimuru off for understandable reasons, and is more than a little pissed that Clayman has just decided to waltz in, beat his friend over the head, and then just keep going on like nothing's normal. But he does conclude that Clayman will eventually get what's his and decides to just let it go for the time being. And finally, we actually are introduced to Leon. So we've met Leon Cromwell already. He's been a recurring character up until this point, but he actually approaches Rimuru out of the blue because, as he points out, he actually resembles Shizu quite a bit, which is a natural response. And Rimuru even outright states that he wants to punch Leon in the face for what he did. But Leon points out that he actually has no idea what Rimuru could actually be referring to, pointing out that she didn't want, that he gave her the choice to be a human, pointing out that to live amongst humans, and points out that he doesn't really feel like that deserves to take a punch, since all he really did was grant her deepest desire and gave her Ifrit so that she can actually continue living onward as a human. So it's not entirely clear when that's actually true, if any of that is actually true, but Leon does point out that if Rimuru is so intent on actually fighting him, that he'll invite him back to his castle when Walpurgis is actually over, and points out that they can actually have it out then and actually talk it out a little bit. And Rimuru decides that that's completely fine, and tells him that he better actually send the invitation. And Leon merely points out that that's only if he actually survives Walpurgis, which scares Rimuru quite a bit. So yeah, this episode just kind of ends with that, with Rimuru sitting down to actually meet with the other Demon Lords and actually figure out who they are and what kind of powers they have, or at the very least figure out how powerful they are. So yeah, and I mean the main event of this episode is Shuna actually kicking ass. So that's mainly the thing we need to take away from this. Shuna is actually pretty scary when she's pissed and can actually hold her in a fight if she absolutely has to. But yeah, overall, I did like this episode. I liked seeing Shuna kick some ass at long last. It took quite a while, but she does finally showcase that she is indeed able to hold her own in a fight, even if she isn't as powerful as some of the other isn't as powerful as some of the other people in her party and in her group. So yeah, in any case, that's my review of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon if you want to help support me. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to check those out in the description below as well. Also, I have a Twitch if you want to see those. I stream every Sunday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, so if you want to check those out, by all means, link is down in the description. Be sure to go check those out. And finally, if you want to see even more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So, if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But, regardless of whether or not you do any of those things, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!